The morning sun rose slowly over the quiet land of Willow Creek. The fields were golden, and the air carried a smell of earth and grass. Birds sang from the fence posts, and a few horses grazed lazily in the distance. Lucas stood near the wooden fence of his ranch, wearing an old hat and holding a hammer in his hand. He had always loved mornings like this. His ranch was his pride, his peace, and his home. He had lived there for many years, away from the noise of the city. He liked to fix things with his own hands, feed his animals, and enjoy the calm around him. His nearest neighbors were part of a homeowners association, known simply as the HOA, but his ranch stood just outside their boundary. Even then, the HOA members often acted like they had some say over his property. The leader of that group was a woman named Diane. Most people in town called her the Rule Lady because she always carried a notepad and took notes about what others were doing wrong. Lucas did not hate her, but he did not like her way of treating others either. She had once complained about his fence color, even though his ranch was not under HOA control. She had also told his delivery driver once to move the truck from the road because it did not look neat. Lucas usually ignored her, thinking it was better not to argue. He liked peace more than pride. That day, Lucas was repairing a broken fence near the south side of his land. He had been working since sunrise, and his hands were covered with dust. As he lifted a new wooden plank into place, his phone buzzed in his pocket. When he answered, a calm voice from the local sheriff's office spoke. "Mr. Lucas," said the officer, "we just received a 911 call about suspicious activity on your ranch. A woman named Diane reported that something illegal might be happening there. Are you all right?" Lucas was surprised but stayed calm. "Yes, officer, everything's fine. I'm just fixing a fence. I don't know why anyone would call the police for that." The officer sounded almost embarrassed. "It seems like a misunderstanding, sir. We just wanted to check in." Lucas thanked the officer and ended the call. He looked toward the road and saw Diane standing there with her phone still in her hand. She was staring at him, arms crossed, with a proud look on her face. Lucas raised his hand politely in greeting, but Diane did not wave back. She turned away and began walking briskly toward her house, her notepad still tucked under her arm. Lucas sighed softly and returned to his work. He had no time to argue with people who created trouble for no reason. Later in the afternoon, Lucas drove his old pickup truck to town to buy some tools. As he passed the small grocery store, a few locals waved at him. They knew about Diane's habits and often joked about her strictness. One of them, an old man named Peter, called out to him, "Lucas, I heard Diane called the cops on you again. What was it this time? Did your fence break one of her sacred rules?" Lucas chuckled. "I guess fixing fences is now a crime in Willow Creek." They both laughed, but deep inside, Lucas felt uneasy. He never liked unnecessary drama, and he knew Diane would not stop. She always found something to complain about. When Lucas returned home, he sat on his porch and watched the sunset. The orange light touched the tops of the hills, and his horses moved slowly toward the barn. It should have been a peaceful evening, but he kept thinking about what had happened. Why had she called 911? What did she expect? Did she really believe something bad was happening, or did she just want to prove a point? As he thought about it, he realized that Diane's behavior had been growing worse over the past few months. She had argued with almost every neighbor in the area. She had demanded that everyone follow her version of the rules, even if those rules did not apply to them. The HOA board members were tired of her, but she always managed to get her way by talking louder and acting important. Lucas shook his head and smiled faintly. He knew life was too short to argue with people like that. Still, something told him that this time was different. Calling 911 was not a small complaint anymore. It was serious, and it showed that Diane was willing to go too far. That night, Lucas made himself dinner and opened his laptop to check some emails. He managed part of the community's land management system because of his position in the local council. It was not widely known, but he had been given special oversight responsibilities for several rural properties in the county. As he went through the files, he noticed a new email marked as important. The subject read, Homeowners Association Oversight Update. Curious, he opened it. The message explained that the county had recently approved a new system to supervise all HOA operations in the area, including the one led by Diane. The message also stated that Lucas had been assigned as the main reviewer for the HOA's financial and policy reports. Because of his management background, Lucas stared at the screened for a long moment, then slowly smiled. He now realized that in a strange twist of fate, he was officially the person responsible for supervising Diane's HOA, the same HOA whose leader had called the police on him for fixing a fence. He leaned back in his chair and laughed quietly. Life had a funny way of balancing things. He did not plan to misuse his position or take revenge, but he knew this would change everything. The next morning, Lucas went back to his usual routine. He fed the animals, cleaned the stable, and checked his emails again. He decided to keep the new information to himself for now. He wanted to see how things would unfold naturally. Later that week, Diane sent another notice to the entire neighborhood. It was about mailbox sizes and grass height, two things she often obsessed over. She had even added a note about how people should not keep noisy animals. Everyone in the community was tired of her endless rules, but they never knew how to stop her. Lucas looked at the notice and smiled again. Soon he would be attending the HOA's upcoming meeting. He had been invited before but never went. This time he planned to go. He wanted to see the expressions on everyone's faces when they found out who now oversaw the entire association. As the sun set again over Willow Creek, Lucas stood near his fence watching the calm field stretch toward the horizon. He felt peaceful but also amused. The same woman who had called 911 on him was now unknowingly under his supervision. He had no plan for revenge, only for fairness. If people wanted to live peacefully, they needed leaders who cared about balance, not control. Lucas believed in kindness and justice, not shouting or power. He wanted to show the community that respect worked better than rules written with anger. That night, as the crickets sang and the wind rustled through the grass, Lucas smiled to himself. The story had only begun, but he knew one thing for sure. Diane had picked the wrong person to challenge this time, and soon the entire neighborhood would learn that the calm rancher was not just another quiet neighbor. He was the man who could change everything. The next morning began with a thin fog covering the fields of Willow Creek. The grass was wet with dew, and the sound of birds echoed across the land. Lucas was standing near the barn, brushing down his horse named Brownie. The calm rhythm of his work helped him think clearly. The events of the past day still stayed in his mind. Diane had called 911 on him, and that was not something easy to forget. As he worked, his dog Rusty ran around chasing a butterfly. Lucas smiled slightly at the sight. Peaceful moments like these reminded him why he loved his life on the ranch. He did not want trouble. He wanted quiet days, fresh air, and honest work. But life had now placed him in a strange position. After breakfast, Lucas walked to his office, a small room inside his house with a wooden desk and an old computer. He turned on his laptop and opened the county management system. The message he had received last night still glowed at the top of his inbox. It was an official notice that he was now the main reviewer for several homeowners associations, including the one run by Diane. Lucas read it again carefully to make sure it was real. The letter clearly said that he had full authority to inspect HOA activities, check how they use their funds, and make sure their rules followed county guidelines. It meant he could audit their work, approve or reject changes, and even suggest restructuring if needed. He leaned back in his chair and thought about it for a while. The same woman who treated him like an outsider was now under his professional supervision. It almost felt unreal. He did not want to laugh at her or take revenge, but the situation was too ironic to ignore. Later that day, Lucas decided to visit the local county office to confirm his new role. When he arrived, he met with a man named George who handled HOA documentation. George was friendly and had known Lucas for years. "Lucas, good to see you," said George. "Yes, it's true. You are now the regional HOA overseer. We needed someone responsible, and your ranch records show you handle your property better than anyone in the district." Lucas smiled and shook George's hand. "Thank you. I just want to make sure everything runs fair and smooth." George nodded. "That's what we need. Some of these HOAs have been acting like private kingdoms, especially the one on the west side led by Diane. You might want to take a look at her reports. There have been some complaints." Lucas did not show any emotion, but inside he already knew this would get interesting. "I'll start with that one," he said calmly. On his way back home, Lucas stopped at a small coffee shop near the main street. A few locals were sitting there, and as soon as he entered, they waved at him. They had all heard about the 911 call. News in Willow Creek traveled fast. A woman named Carla spoke first. "Lucas, we heard Diane called the police on you again. What was that about?" Lucas chuckled lightly. "I was fixing a fence. I think she didn't like the sound of my hammer." Everyone laughed. Even the shop owner smiled. They all knew Diane's behavior too well. She had once complained about Christmas lights being too bright, and another time about kids playing music in their backyard. After a few friendly words, Lucas left the shop and drove home. He felt more certain now about what he had to do. He would not let the HOA become a problem for others. He would make sure fairness returned to the neighborhood. That evening, Lucas sat on his porch again, watching the golden light fade across the hills. The air was quiet except for the soft sounds of crickets. He thought about how to approach the situation. He did not want to embarrass Diane or create anger, but he also did not want her to keep disturbing people. He decided he would start by reviewing the HOA's documents and sending a formal reminder to follow county standards. He wanted to set a tone of respect and balance. People like Diane needed to understand that authority came with responsibility. Over the next few days, Lucas reviewed the HOA files. What he found surprised him. The group had spent money on things that were not approved, such as decorations for Diane's front yard and small repairs that only benefited a few homes instead of the entire neighborhood. There were also many complaints from residents who felt bullied by strict rules. Lucas made careful notes and prepared a report. He included recommendations for fairer policies and suggested that all members should have equal say in decisions. He also decided to attend their next meeting in person to explain the new county oversight rules. When the day of the HOA meeting came, Lucas dressed neatly and arrived early. The meeting was held in a small hall near the community park. Diane was already there, standing at the front, talking to two board members. She was wearing a bright jacket and holding her notepad as always. She did not notice Lucas at first. As more residents arrived, Lucas quietly took a seat at the back. He listened as Diane began her usual speech about keeping lawns short, driveways clean, and fences painted a certain color. Many people nodded politely, but their faces showed boredom and irritation. Then, when the time came for community updates, Lucas stood up. His calm voice filled the room. "Good evening, everyone. My name is Lucas. I live just outside your neighborhood at Willow Ranch. I'm here today as part of the new county oversight team for homeowners associations. I wanted to explain some new policies that affect this community." The room fell silent. Diane looked surprised. She frowned slightly but forced a polite smile. "Oh, I see. That's very interesting. Please continue." Lucas spoke clearly and kindly. He explained that all HOAs were now under direct county supervision. Every decision, every budget report, and every complaint would be reviewed for fairness. He said the purpose was not control but improvement. He also mentioned that misuse of authority or unfair treatment would no longer be ignored. As he spoke, some neighbors nodded in agreement. They seemed relieved. For years they had wanted someone to speak up but were too afraid to challenge Diane. When Lucas finished, Diane tried to keep her tone calm. "Thank you, Mr. Lucas. I'm sure our HOA has nothing to worry about. We have always followed the rules." Lucas smiled politely. "That's good to hear. I'll be reviewing all past reports soon, and I'll share my findings with the county and with the community." Her smile faded slightly, but she did not argue. Lucas could see she was trying to stay composed. After the meeting ended, several neighbors came to thank Lucas quietly. One woman said, "We're glad someone finally noticed what's been going on." Lucas thanked them and left without any sign of pride. He did not want to make a scene. His goal was to bring peace, not conflict. That night, as he returned to his ranch, he felt a deep sense of calm. The stars were bright above the fields, and the horses moved gently in the moonlight. For the first time in a long while, Lucas felt like justice was slowly returning to Willow Creek. He knew this was only the beginning. Diane would not take this easily. She liked control, and losing it would not sit well with her. But Lucas was ready. He had no anger in his heart, only a steady belief that fairness always found its way. As the wind blew softly through the open fields, Lucas looked out from his porch and whispered to himself that peace could not be built on fear, only on respect. The days after the meeting were calm on the surface, but underneath, tension started to build in the neighborhood. Everyone had seen the new county overseer at the meeting, and everyone now knew that Lucas was not just a quiet rancher. He was the man who could inspect everything in the HOA. His calm voice and polite manner had made an impression on many people. But for Diane, it was a heavy blow to her pride. Diane had always liked being in control. For years, she had built her image as the one who knew every rule and could correct everyone's mistake. Now she felt her position shaking. After the meeting, she stayed up late in her living room, flipping through HOA files and old notes. Her husband asked her to rest, but she kept muttering that something about Lucas did not feel right. By the next morning, Diane had decided she would not lose her control so easily. She told herself that if she followed the rules perfectly, Lucas would not find anything wrong. She started walking around the neighborhood again with her notepad, writing down everything she saw that did not meet HOA standards. She even stopped at a house where a boy had left a toy car on the driveway. Diane took a photo and wrote, "Unattended objects left outside for more than 4 hours." The mother of the boy saw her and shook her head. People were growing tired of her behavior. Meanwhile, Lucas continued his work quietly. He had received several messages from residents thanking him for attending the meeting. Many of them shared their problems with him, such as unfair fines, rude letters, and sudden rule changes. Lucas listened carefully and wrote everything down. He wanted to understand how the HOA had been operating for so long without anyone questioning it. Each evening, after finishing his ranch work, Lucas would sit at his desk and read through the HOA's old reports. The more he read, the more he realized how unbalanced the system had become. Diane had created many rules that benefited a few people while making life difficult for others. She had even approved small payments to herself for administrative work. It was not a crime, but it showed poor leadership. Lucas knew he had to act carefully. He did not want to start a public argument or embarrass anyone. His goal was to bring fairness, not chaos. He decided to write a formal review report that he would send to both the county and the HOA board. He wanted every step to be legal and respectful. One afternoon, while he was working in his barn, a car stopped near his gate. It was Diane. She stepped out wearing sunglasses and holding a folder. Lucas wiped his hands and walked toward her. "Good afternoon, Diane," he said politely. She smiled stiffly. "Hello, Lucas, I thought we should talk." Lucas nodded. "Of course. What can I help you with?" She looked around as if checking who might be watching. "I just wanted to make sure everything is fine between us. You know how things can get misunderstood. The 911 call, for example. It was just concern for the community. Nothing personal." Lucas kept his calm smile. "I understand. No hard feelings. But since I'm now reviewing the HOA records, I'll be following normal procedures. Everything will be done by the book." Her smile faded a little. "Of course," she said, her voice less friendly. "I just hope you'll see that we've always followed the rules." Lucas nodded. "That's what I'll find out." Diane forced another smile and returned to her car. As she drove away, Lucas watched her go, knowing that this visit was not about peace. It was a warning. She wanted to show she was still confident. Later that week, Lucas received a message from the county office. They wanted him to prepare a preliminary review of Diane's HOA within the next 10 days. It was an official order, meaning he could not delay it. He began working right away, gathering all the data, receipts, and meeting notes from the last 2 years. As he worked, he found more examples of how the HOA had gone beyond its limits. There were cases where homeowners had been fined for harmless things like planting the wrong kind of flower or painting their door a color that Diane did not like. There were also missing receipts for certain spending. Lucas documented everything with care. Meanwhile, inside the neighborhood, whispers began to spread. People were talking about how Diane was losing her influence. Some said Lucas was going to remove her from the board, while others said the county might dissolve the entire HOA. Diane heard these rumors and grew more restless every day. One evening, she called for an emergency HOA meeting at her house. Only a few loyal members came. She stood in her living room and spoke in a sharp tone. "We need to protect our community. This man Lucas is trying to take control. He says he's fair, but he's from outside. He doesn't know how we live here." One member asked quietly, "But Diane, isn't he assigned by the county?" Diane waved her hand. "The county makes mistakes all the time. We'll prove we are fine on our own." Her plan was to show that her HOA was efficient and perfect. She ordered her members to repaint signs, fix fences, and make the area look flawless. She wanted to give Lucas no reason to complain. But no matter how neat things looked, paperwork never lied. Lucas already had enough information to know that her leadership had gone far beyond what was allowed. Days passed quickly, and Lucas finished his report. It was written clearly and respectfully. He included all his findings, explaining which actions broke county policies and how residents had suffered under unfair rules. He did not use harsh words or blame anyone directly. Instead, he focused on facts and solutions. When the report was ready, he submitted it to the county office and sent a copy to the HOA board. It was now official. The review process had begun. The next morning, the entire neighborhood buzzed with talk. Some people thanked Lucas openly, while others stayed quiet but smiled when they saw him. For the first time, the community felt hope. Diane, however, was furious. She called several board members, demanding an explanation, but they could do nothing. The report had already been sent to the county, and they had to cooperate with the investigation. That evening, as Lucas sat on his porch, he saw Diane's car pass by slowly. She looked at his ranch but did not stop. The look on her face was not anger anymore. It was worry. Lucas sighed softly. He did not enjoy seeing anyone suffer, even if they had caused trouble. But he also knew that truth had to come out for peace to return. As the sun disappeared behind the hills, Lucas felt a sense of calm inside him. He had done what was right without raising his voice or seeking revenge. He believed that the best justice was quiet and steady, like water shaping stone over time. That night, as the stars shone bright above the ranch, Lucas knew that the next few days would bring change to Willow Creek. The calm before the storm was ending, and soon everyone would see what fairness truly meant. A week later, the county office called a public meeting for all members of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. It was scheduled to take place at the community hall near the park. The message went out to every household, explaining that the meeting would cover important updates about management, fairness, and community improvements. Everyone knew what it really meant. It was time to discuss Lucas's review and the future of the HOA. By the morning of the meeting, people were already talking about it. Some hoped that the county would bring real change, while others were simply curious to see how Diane would react. Diane herself was nervous, though she would never admit it. She had spent the last week checking every file, every receipt, and every email. She was trying to find a way to defend herself. Her husband tried to calm her down, but she stayed restless. She could not believe that the quiet rancher she once reported to the police was now the person reviewing her work. Every time she thought about it, her face turned red. That afternoon, the community hall was full. Dozens of neighbors came, talking quietly among themselves. Lucas arrived a little early, wearing clean jeans and a simple white shirt. He greeted people kindly and took a seat near the front. His calm nature gave the room a sense of peace, even though everyone could feel the tension in the air. When the county representative, George, arrived, the room went silent. He stood at the podium and began to speak in a clear voice. "Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming. Today we will discuss the findings from the recent review of the Willow Creek Homeowners Association. The review was conducted by Mr. Lucas, who has been appointed as Regional HOA Overseer. He will now share his report and recommendations." All eyes turned toward Lucas. Diane's face tightened, but she kept her posture straight. Lucas stood up slowly, walked to the front, and greeted everyone with a polite nod. "Thank you, George," he said, "and thank you all for being here. I know that community meetings are not always easy, but they are important. I want to begin by saying that this review was not about blame. It was about balance. Rules are meant to protect people, not to control them." His calm voice filled the hall. Even people who had come only out of curiosity began to listen carefully. Lucas opened a folder and started explaining his findings. He talked about how some rules had been enforced unfairly, how certain homeowners had been fined without clear reasons, and how some HOA funds had been used without proper approval. He spoke clearly, never raising his voice, and avoided naming anyone directly. But everyone knew who was responsible. As he spoke, Diane shifted in her seat. Her fingers tapped nervously on her notepad. Lucas continued, "The purpose of an HOA is to bring people together. It is meant to solve problems, not create them. After reviewing the records, it is clear that too many people here felt unheard and mistreated. That must change." The room was silent. Some people looked at Diane, while others nodded in agreement. A few even whispered quietly to one another. relieved that someone was finally saying what they had felt for years. After Lucas finished presenting his main findings, he handed a few papers to George, who announced the next part of the meeting. Based on the results of this review, the county has decided to take corrective action. The current leadership structure of the Willow Creek HOA will be temporarily dissolved until a fair election can take place. During this time, the HOA's operations will be overseen by the county office. The announcement hit the room like a wave. People gasped, and some even clapped softly. Diane froze in her chair, unable to move. Her face turned pale as she realized what had just happened. Lucas did not look at her directly. He knew this was difficult for her, but he also knew it was necessary. George continued, "We are not here to punish anyone. We are here to rebuild trust. Mr. Lucas will help guide the transition process, and we hope this community can move forward together." When the meeting ended, small groups formed around the hall. People were talking excitedly, shaking hands and smiling. For the first time in a long while, there was a feeling of relief. The strict rules that had made their lives difficult were finally gone. Diane, however, stayed seated. She was still trying to understand what had happened. Her closest supporters came to her, but she waved them away. After a few minutes, she stood up and walked out quietly, holding her notepad close to her chest. Lucas watched her leave, but said nothing. He did not take joy in her fall. He simply hoped that this change would bring peace. Outside the hall, the sun was setting behind the hills. The golden light spread across the fields, making everything look warm and calm. Lucas stood near his truck, talking to a few neighbors who came to thank him. "Lucas, you really helped us," said a woman named Carla. "For years we felt like we had no voice. Today we finally feel free." Lucas smiled kindly. "I'm glad to hear that. A community works best when people respect each other. That's all I wanted." Another man, Peter, added, "Diane had too much power for too long. Maybe now she'll see that rules should be for everyone, not just for some." Lucas nodded. "I believe she'll understand in time. Everyone learns when the truth comes out." That night, when Lucas returned to his ranch, he felt tired but peaceful. The sky was dark and full of stars. The horses were already resting in the barn, and his dog Rusty lay near the porch. Lucas sat down with a cup of tea and looked out over his land. The quietness felt different now, fuller somehow. It was the calm that comes after doing what is right. The next day, he received an email from George confirming that the county had officially approved the restructuring of the HOA. Diane was no longer in charge, and all her decisions were now under review. A few days later, Lucas went into town for some supplies. As he walked out of the hardware store, he saw Diane standing near her car. She looked tired and unsure. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Then Diane walked over slowly. "Lucas," she said quietly, "I didn't expect things to turn out this way. I thought I was helping the community, but maybe I lost sight of what really mattered." Lucas nodded gently. "Sometimes we get too focused on rules and forget about people. It happens. What matters now is what you do next." She looked down, then back at him. "I'll try to do better. Maybe I can still be part of the new board when it's rebuilt." "I think that would be good," Lucas said. "People respect honesty more than control. If you come back with a better heart, they'll welcome you." She gave a small nod and walked away. It was not an apology, but it was a beginning. As Lucas drove back to his ranch, he thought about how strange life could be. A simple 911 call had started all this, and now the entire neighborhood had changed. What began as trouble had ended as transformation. That evening, Lucas stood at his fence watching the fields turn silver under the moonlight. He felt thankful for the peace around him. Willow Creek had learned something important about fairness, and so had he. But he also knew the story was not fully over. There was still the final decision from the county to come, and the new election would decide the HOA's future. Lucas was ready for whatever came next. His only wish was to see his town live in peace without fear or pride, just simple respect and community. Weeks passed after the meeting that changed everything in Willow Creek. The air around the community felt lighter, calmer, and friendlier. For the first time in years, people could plant flowers without worrying about surprise finds. Kids could play in front yards, and neighbors actually waved at each other again. It was as if a heavy weight had been lifted from everyone's shoulders. Lucas continued his normal life at the ranch. He woke early every morning, fed his horses, and took care of his fields. But he also spent part of each week helping the county office set up the new rules for the HOA election. He wanted to make sure everything would be fair and open this time. During those weeks, people often stopped by his ranch to thank him. Some brought cookies, some brought fruit, and others just came to talk. They told him how peaceful life had become. Lucas always smiled and reminded them that change only works when people stay united. Diane kept a low profile after the meeting. Most people thought she had left town, but she still lived in her house near the pond. She rarely came out, and when she did, she spoke softly and avoided attention. Many expected her to disappear completely, but Lucas knew she would come around. He had seen enough people change when they were given time to think. One morning, Lucas received a letter from the county office. It invited him to oversee the final HOA election, which was set for the following Saturday. He smiled as he read it. The moment had finally arrived when the people of Willow Creek would take control of their own community again. The week moved fast. Flyers were sent out and people began discussing who should be on the new board. Names like Carla, Peter, and even Diane appeared in conversations. Some thought Diane should not return, but others believed she had learned her lesson. On Saturday morning, the community hall was decorated with simple banners and balloons. Tables were set up for voting, and there was even a small snack stand outside where kids sold lemonade. The air was filled with excitement. Everyone wanted to see what the future of their neighborhood would look like. Lucas arrived early as usual. He helped set up chairs and checked the voting lists. He wore his old ranch hat and a clean shirt. People greeted him with warm smiles. He had become a quiet hero in their eyes, though he never saw himself that way. When the voting started, Lucas stood by the entrance watching the families come in. It was heartwarming to see people who had once avoided meetings now showing up with enthusiasm. Some of them even brought their children to teach them about fairness and community spirit. After 2 hours, most of the votes were cast. While the counting took place, Lucas walked outside to breathe the fresh morning air. Near the edge of the field, he saw Diane standing alone. She wore a simple gray jacket and looked nervous. Lucas walked toward her slowly. She turned when she heard his footsteps. "Morning, Diane," he said kindly. She gave a small nod. "Morning, Lucas. I wasn't sure I should come." "Of course you should," he replied. "You're part of this community too." She looked down at the grass. "I made a lot of mistakes. I wanted to help people, but I ended up hurting them instead. I guess I thought being strict meant being responsible." Lucas smiled softly. "Sometimes control feels like care, but they're not the same. What matters is that you understand that now." She nodded slowly. "I just hope people can forgive me." "They already started to," Lucas said. "Forgiveness takes time, but it begins with honesty. If you stay true, they'll see your change." After a pause, Diane looked at him and said, "I'm not expecting to win today, but I still wanted to stand for election. I want to do things right this time." Lucas nodded approvingly. "That's a good reason to run. No one expects perfection, only sincerity." They stood quietly for a while, watching families walk past them. The sound of laughter and conversation filled the air. It was a good sound, full of hope. When the counting finished, George came out of the hall with the results. Everyone gathered around as he read the names. Carla was elected as the new president, Peter became the treasurer, and 2 younger members joined as new board officers. To everyone's surprise, Diane received enough votes to earn a position as community advisor. People clapped and cheered. Even Diane seemed stunned. She looked around at the faces smiling at her. Lucas caught her eye and gave a small nod as if to say, "See, people believe in change." Carla stepped forward and thanked everyone. "We have a new beginning," she said. "We will listen to every voice and make decisions together. This is not about rules anymore. It's about respect." The crowd cheered again. For the first time, the Willow Creek HOA felt like a community and not a system of control. After the event, people stayed to talk, share food, and enjoy the day. Children played near the pond while parents chatted happily. Lucas walked among them, shaking hands and listening to their plans for improvements. Someone mentioned planting trees along the road, and another suggested starting a monthly farmers market. The ideas kept coming. As the sun began to set, Lucas stood near the fence watching the golden light reflect on the water. Diane approached him again, holding a small envelope. "This is for you," she said. "It's a letter I wrote after the meeting weeks ago. I never sent it because I didn't think you'd want to hear from me." Lucas took it and nodded. "Thank you. I'll read it later." She smiled faintly. "Whatever happens next, I'm glad you came to Willow Creek. You reminded us that fairness still exists. Lucas looked at her kindly. It always exists. Sometimes it just needs someone to remind others where to find it. She walked away toward her car, and Lucas stood there for a while, watching the last light fade. The fields glowed under the evening sky, peaceful and still. When he returned to his ranch, he sat on the porch with Rusty by his side. The stars began to appear one by one. He opened the envelope and read the letter. In the letter, Diane had written about how she realized her mistakes, how she wanted to rebuild trust, and how she hoped to make things right. She thanked him for showing patience when she had shown anger. The words were simple, but they came from the heart. Lucas folded the letter and smiled. He placed it in a small wooden box where he kept things that mattered most to him. Then he leaned back in his chair and looked at the stars again. The ranch was quiet, only the sound of crickets in the grass. Lucas felt peaceful knowing that the people of Willow Creek were finally free from fear and division. He had not planned to become part of their lives, but somehow fate had brought him there to make a difference. Weeks later, the neighborhood began to flourish. New gardens appeared, community gatherings became common, and laughter often echoed across the streets. The spirit of friendship had returned. One afternoon, Lucas rode his horse past the park and saw a new wooden sign near the entrance. It said, "Welcome to Willow Creek, a community built on fairness." He stopped and looked at it with pride. Beneath the words, someone had added a smaller line that said, "Inspired by Lucas, our friend and neighbor." He smiled, touched by the gesture. Then he rode back toward his ranch, the wind blowing softly through the tall grass. Life had come full circle. He had arrived as a quiet rancher and been treated like an outsider, but now he was part of something larger. He had helped transform not just a neighborhood, but the hearts of its people. And as the sun set behind the hills, Lucas knew one simple truth. Fairness was stronger than pride, kindness was louder than control, and peace would always return where justice lived.